Tim Cools, I'm so happy that we're here talking about coaching and psychedelics. This conversation has been a long time coming, and I really look forward. We had quite a few touch points already, and I'm really looking forward to exploring your perspective on coaching and psychedelics, particularly work around microdosing. Mindfulness is coming in. There's a lot that we have to talk about. So Tim Cools, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Yannick. I was looking forward to this also for a long time already. So really grateful to be here and really exciting to talk about all these things. Really passionate about all these topics. So yes.
Wonderful. Hey, we usually start off with somebody at a dinner party asks you what you do. Now, it could be in a park, could be any other situation, but hey, what do you do, Tim? Kind of question. What do you tell them?
It's still sometimes a little bit hesitant to start talking about it. I had it last weekend because I didn't know if the guy was a policeman or not.
Does that matter?
No, it doesn't matter. But it's just still some feeling. I think it didn't matter for such a long time. But nothing what I do is illegal, of course. But, what do I do? Good question. I help people prepare for, be with and integrate psychedelic experiences. So I use psychedelics and mindfulness as tools for people to grow their awareness, to become more aware of what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what their body is telling them, and eventually maybe help them to reach more transpersonal states.
What do you mean by that?
A state where you have the feeling like a mystical experience, a state where people experience that there might be something more, or they have the feeling that there is maybe something more as this material world, and the feeling of connectedness between everything. And I help people to prepare for this kind of experiences, but also integrate this kind of experience. And I combine the psychedelics with mindfulness because I believe that the strong, powerful experiences are really valuable. But I also believe in daily life, we need other tools to cope with whatever is coming towards us. And I think mindfulness, developing this awareness of whatever is going on right now in this moment is at least as important as the psychedelic experience.
I love that. Could you give us a bit more of context, perhaps, from where you are talking from? So we know how do you kind of introduce yourself. It already speaks to the kind of work you do, and not just the work that you do, but what you help people with, which I think is such a powerful way of introducing ourselves. It's like, this is what I can do for people. But like, if you were to add in a couple of facts, around you, who you are, where you're from in terms of philosophy, school of thought, training. If you could talk a little bit about your story into psychedelics.
So I'm always was very autodidactic. So I learned myself software engineering when I was 10 years old. I did a long career, at least for my age, long career in software development. But at a certain point, I became quite unhappy with what I was doing. And this is how I moved into the mindfulness also. It's willing to be able to observe and to become familiar with my emotions, because this was something that I neglected for a very long period in my life. So I learned quite a hard way to be very present with everything that was happening, because in 2018 I had quite a severe crash physically. I had a parasite infection which stayed with me for 8 months, and the recovery process was long and slow. There was a diagnosis of post-infectious fatigue syndrome, which is similar to the chronic fatigue. And this was a very painful moment, and I still have to be careful what I do energy-wise, but I can probably should not do 7 days of snowboarding still, but still it was one of the most profound experiences I had in my life. This made me super aware of everything that I was thinking, about everything that I was feeling, really getting in touch with myself again, if I would say this is what probably the most profound experience, together with my first mystical experience I had with ayahuasca. In 2015, it gave me like this experience of being connected to everything that exists, being connected with the whole universe was so beautiful. The ultimate joy, the ultimate love was so beautiful that I realized that I had to do something with this kind of experience. I've been taking mushrooms since I was 15 years old. But this kind of experience I never had before. This profound, and how deep it went. And this was really life-changing for me. Back then I thought, okay, everybody should experience this. The more I learned about it, the more I realized everybody should be able to experience it is if they're ready and open for this, if they want this in a safe and in a responsible way. So since the moment I did the ayahuasca experience, I started to read everything. I was really surprised that there is scientific research. My initial question was, how can a molecule give this kind of experience to us as humans? I was so blown away by this. I had to know everything about it. So after I came back from this more difficult experience with the parasite, I realized that working with the computer 60, 70 hours a week, that it's nice. I really enjoy that. But helping people, from my experience, what helped me, this was much more fulfilling. So I was really passionate about all the things that helped me, which are the psychedelics, which are the mindfulness, which are also coaching, because I also at the same time came in contact with the coach, my first contact with the coach. It helped me also quite profoundly. I always had this quite a negative or prejudgment about coaching. But until I was in a very vulnerable state myself, and there was this one coach who helped me a lot back then, and this opened me to the world of possibilities. He was quite interesting. He was a business coach. He charged quite a lot of money for one session, and in the end, after 3 sessions, he said, "You don't need coaching courses. You don't need anything of this. Just go out and help people." Okay, yes, I listened to him and I thought, yes, I should do that probably. He was somebody who did for 10 years courses and never did something with it. So I understand this point of view, but I wanted to have at least some background for myself.
Courses as in training, or what do you mean by courses?
Yeah, by training, different specific workshops. He went to Tobin Robbins, all these different, but he never started to do it. So I understand where it came from, but for me personally, of course, I needed to have a solid base to start from. So, mindfulness helped me really a lot. So I became a mindfulness teacher, something I really enjoy doing, and which also combined in the products or my offerings these days. And I also started to do all kind of online courses related to psychedelics. It was a few years ago, so it was not the offerings were not as extensive as what is now. But still, and also from reading myself and also from personal experience, I did a coaching course, etc. So I did a combination of all kind of smaller things, which I combined into my own approach to help people. I focus mainly on professionals, but I come from the software industry, but so more at the moment I focus mainly on people from tech startups, also from bigger companies, but I also have people from marketing, from also the mental health, psychologists, doctors also end up with me because they want to have this experience, but I don't work with the clinical population, obviously. Work with people who have strong mental labels assigned to them from healthcare.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned mindfulness as a kind of a cornerstone of your practice, because really it's about presence and being fully present with somebody, which is what when we when we develop a mindfulness practice, that's what we're learning, right? To be really, really present with whatever moment is there. And when we're doing that with other people, we're being really present with our client, which I think is half the success of, it's the half of what makes a good coaching relationship, is to be really present with someone. So could you tell us a little bit more about how coaching comes into your work? Mindfulness being a big part of that, I'm sure. But you've done some training, you've worked with some people. Could you give us a little bit more of an idea of what you mean by when you say coaching, particularly in the psychedelic field?
Yes. So if I offer full programs, and I offer full program. I am a legal guide in the Netherlands, so I live in Belgium. It's only 1 hour and 15 minutes from the retreat location where I can do my guided sessions with psilocybin truffles, which are legal there. And I combine them in a package with coaching. I call it coaching. There's also some mentoring in this, and there's some educational content. So first it starts with looking with the people where they come from and where they are right now in the moment, and where they want to be in the future. So this is looking both in different areas of their life. I use some exercises, so it's not it's open, of course, but at the beginning we start as a base, solid foundation, we start with some exercises. And then we dive deeper into what is important for them, what are their values, how are they now coping with their emotions, for example. How can they implement maybe awareness, those tools of awareness into their life, just to become more present, to become more aware of what they're thinking. And we look at these different areas in our life, about the mind, about the body, about the community, their environment, the people they work with, what kind of practices they have, and the values. The values are very important also, because you can become very aware of your thoughts with mindfulness, but if you don't know which thoughts you have to follow, then it might be very confusing.
So we're still talking about the preparation phase here?
Yes, this is the preparation phase.
So there's a mentoring element, there's an element of coaching, yes. And then the guiding is separate from that.
Yes, so the full program is 3 sessions before. The first 2 sessions and half of the third session, we go more in the where they come from and what brings them here, looking deeper into why they want to do this, what is important for them, etc. And the third session also combines a little bit of educational content, preparing people practically to have the session, because I guide it also, so it goes... Right. It's a little bit educational also for them.
Yeah. Could I zoom into that part? Because I think a lot of coaches out there, in and outside of the psychedelic field, they're always wondering, well, at what point does it become mentoring? And is it okay to have mentoring in there? And it sounds like the mentoring element is an important part of your journey. So I'm wondering, which parts are educational? Which parts are you sharing your experience, your own experience? Or what sort of things do you share, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yes, absolutely. Good question. Very good question. And I try to be clear about the difference also. What I share is open. So I can, for example, I prepare people to this experience, to tell them what are the range of possible experience that one can have, for them to prepare, and also give them tools. And these are awareness tools, of attention tools, for example, to navigate them. For example, I tell them that people can have very profound ideas, that are very profound thoughts that are very magnified, which can be really, really insightful. But sometimes you also end up in thought loops. Thought loops are thoughts that stick with you, and and there are tools. For example, if you want to get out of it, what helps is acceptance. Like, what is acceptance? Redirecting your attention back to the sensations, to the body. So I give them this kind of tools, and with emotions the same. If you get really strong emotions, one moment you can cry from sadness, the other moment you can cry from happiness. But sometimes emotions can be really overwhelming, and many people in our society are not used to be with emotions, to stay with emotions. We want them to go away. And this is one of the profound things with the psychedelic experience, that we can learn to accept everything as it evolves during. So this is part of the mentoring to give them these tools to navigate these different situations. Also, if they feel resistance, for example, if they go into the direction of ego loss, some people feel resistance, and sometimes even when I give the tools, it's not possible for them to allow themselves to surrender. But surrendering is really stepping out of these thoughts, stepping out of this thinking, and coming back to the experience where we are. So this is part of it, and then also practical, how to best prepare, what best to do the 10 days before, just taking it easy, taking care of your body, taking care of your mind, emotional states. Don't do anything too intense. Stay away maybe from the media or intense meetings, triggering things. This kind of preparation, so people are very relaxed when they arrive, that they know what to expect a little bit without having expectations. So this is one of the important things also, but this is more in the coaching part, of course. Listening to the people, and if they have really one specific outcome, or they want to go to the mystical experience because they heard this, then making it very clear that it can be, but same chance that it's not. So mitigating the expectations, that's also very important.
And what informs that kind of guidance, that kind of mentoring? Because you're sharing a lot of what sounds like incredibly useful tools, things that help people prepare for that kind of journey, or that kind of experience. What is it informed by? You mentioned science, you mentioned experience. Where do you take that knowledge from that you share?
Good question. So definitely there is a part of science. There is quite some research recently that combines mindfulness with the psychedelic experience, giving people more high doses and having them meditate, looking what the similarities are. I was talking to a researcher who did research in Switzerland with this. He said it was quite difficult to keep them meditating on a high dose sometimes because they wanted to do different things. They were so amazed that on the side. But definitely there's a big overlap in the scientific work with mindfulness, but also in the spiritual practice. If you look at the shamanic practice, if you look at the shaman I work with regularly, he constantly repeats, breathe. And if you say breathe, you focus on your breath. It is coming back to the breath. Breathe and drink your water, he also says. So it's also working with more indigenous or more traditional people. They also use this. They name it maybe differently. They say, make your head clear, and it is then that you allow yourself to go deeper. And also from personal experience, of course. So I think it's threefold. It is the science, which are helping also. If you look at the science, the research from Imperial College, in London, they do these meditations before where they dive down deep into the water where they find their emotions in what's the name, like a shell, like with spikes, like something that you wouldn't pick up normally. And if you dive deeper and you dive deeper and you open it in eventually, then you find a pearl. So, and this is a metaphor for the emotions that we're working with the difficult emotions. So they prepare people also in a little bit in a different way, but with some guided meditation towards this kind of thing.
I love that metaphor of pearl diving, because sometimes we need to dig deep in the mud and often we can't really see it. Murky waters, it's a very rich metaphor. I love that.
Yes, and sometimes I use the meditation with people who really need to understand it, who really don't grasp it yet. I also use different kind of meditations also for when I make a tea first, and then first I do a mindfulness meditation, and I repeat some of the tools right before people go into this experience. So people really try to remember them, and that's also why you have a guide next to you, to remind you. Surrender. But what is surrendering?
Yeah. I'd love to take a few steps back for a moment on that note. Could you just put a few frames around what is a guide, what is a trip sitter, what is a coach, what is a therapist, and how might we make sense of some of these distinctions? And I appreciate it can be a complex question, but I'm just trying to digging into how you see it.
Yes, how I see it. How I see it, these are different roles. The therapist is somebody who is trained traditionally clinically, who works with the clinical population, who works with people who have more pressing, or who have pressing mental struggles, which they want to overcome. They often are, in my experience, they often very focused on the analyzing, on the rational part. I have a few psychologists as clients, and I really learned them to stay with the present moment, to learn to feel what is present in the present moment, because they were always in this rational analyze, always in this rational analyze. That's not to say that they're all like that, because they're also a part, I don't remember what the speciality was. There is a specialty that is also focused on this emotional awareness in psychology. So a coach is someone, might be also clinical trained, but is not focusing on really resolving clinical labels. So it's more helping people move forward in their life, looking where are we now and looking where do they want to be. And there are different types of coaches, and so everybody focus on something different. So for me, it's quite holistic. I don't focus on only business, only relationships, only. So I think the psychedelic experience is an enabler. It enables people to find insights in themselves. And as a coach, we can be there to witness this, to facilitate this, to dig deeper, to help them to dig deeper into what they really want and what is important for them. A trip sitter is a friend who is sitting with a friend while he's doing some psychedelics, I think. Although the lines between the guide and the trip sitter is it's very blurry. And a guide, I would say, is somebody who is very consciously preparing someone, at least giving the information, and sitting next to someone, and knows how to intervene when necessary, when someone is going through a psychedelic experience. The most important thing is do not intervene when it's not necessary. Let the process happen, evolve. But if it's necessary, it can be really helpful for someone to sit next to them, to remind them to be able to surrender, to go back to the body, to get out of these thought loops, for example, to be able to find rest and peace when they go through a difficult moment, just by holding their hand or by touching their shoulder. Or if they want to talk, if they really need to say things, it might also happen. It's very important that we try not to influence people at this point in time, of course. So there is a clear distinction, and I know you talk also about this. There is a clear difference in role that you have to be in when you guide, and in the preparation coaching and in the integration coaching.
Yeah, I think this is such an important conversation, right? Because I know a lot of coaches also sit or guide, and I don't. I imagine I would find it, especially as the trip is sort of wearing off, and the client, we will have a relationship, and you will have done some coaching. You've talked about intentions, and all of this stuff just happened. I would think that the client would want to move into a coaching conversation while they're actually still under the influence and, arguably considered still quite vulnerable. So how do you experience that space? Because I want to focus on the coaching, right? But because a lot of coaches also guide or sit, I'm sure many people are tempted to have coaching conversations while the substance is still active. What's that like? Where do you draw the line? Isn't it awkward when your client wants to start the conversation and you're the same person, so you're there, haven't removed yourself from that? How do you experience that? Or have you had experiences with that?
Yes, I did. All the experiences are different, and some people want to talk. Some people consciously don't want to talk. They don't want to say, I want to digest this first. Some people stay in the experience for a really long time and then want to go to their bed. But some really want to talk. And the difference is, one of the most important things for sitting and guiding is exactly the same as with coaching. It's being present with whatever is unfolding. So this part is the same. And if people want to talk, I'm there to listen. I will not try to dig deeper into what they're saying. I definitely not want to steer the conversation into some direction, even if I think that might help them. This is something that I definitely don't do or don't want to do.
What if they ask you questions? Based on the coaching conversation, based on the intention, and they ask you, what do you think? Or, what we've done, and if they just try to draw something from you.
Yes. It depends what they ask. It's not that I say hard no, I am not talking to you. I'm not. It's just one. That's also would be it would be very awkward. It would be very awkward, and it would not make the person very comfortable with the situation. So yes, I try to maintain a normal conversation, but I think the limit is, especially if someone wants to make conclusions or wants to have the opinion on what they have to do or something, then I refer to the integration sessions. And I say, okay, this is a very interesting point. Let's keep this in mind and let's digest it and let's talk about it in the next session. The first session is in 1 week normally.
Did you take any notes, or is there something you capture to then take into the integration work? Rarely.
I did it a few times because people really wanted to, really were saying things that sounded very important. Many times people are just amazed by the experience and just want to tell me how amazing it is or what the kind of insights they have. And then they have this monologue and I'm just sitting there and I'm just enjoying what they're saying. Once in a while, it becomes more difficult that people want to do things, and this is not really coaching, but this is important for the guiding. For example, one person who thought her father was dying at that specific moment, and at this point, it's very, and it was quite real. She had not. No contact with him for years, and she really had the impression that it was happening at that moment, and she wanted to leave. So these are things, you cannot say, okay, I'm taking a distance. No, I talk with her. I've been present with her, with her, very present. Especially, you should not let this overwhelm yourself, because this is when the situation can go out of hand. But this is the way you talk the person back into the experience, to really try to find what is necessary, what is necessary to find in the experience. So there's a whole range of possibilities, but most of the time I don't make many notes. Sometimes if people, I know that they're very deep in the process, because that's often sometimes that they probably don't remember what they were saying. Most people only want to talk when it's more near the end.
Yeah, this is where I think some of the potential value lies for the coach to also be present during the experience, is to be able to pick some of these things up that the client might have forgotten about, but in the moment it seemed really important. And I think everybody who has had experiences probably remembers a moment where you had such a huge insight. There's such something that was of such gratitude, if that's even a word, that then all of a sudden it's gone. And you're left with this feeling of something has shifted, but you don't know what it was. And I always thought that would be so valuable to have somebody then come to the integration session and said, there was a moment and you said this and then you said that. It seemed like a really important moment. And then you were quite distressed having forgotten about it. I thought, I was really curious to potentially offer that back to you. I would be so grateful on the receiving end of that. What do you think?
Yes, definitely. And it happened. It happened that people say that when they're really deep in this kind of experience, it's not that they start full conversations, but they say more like a sentence, and sometimes it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to listen to. But for the person who goes through it, it does make sense. And when I bring it back, then it's like, yes, and then the whole story comes. When the whole story comes, that's really fascinating and interesting to witness.
Mm-hmm. Is there something left in that department? Otherwise, I'd be super curious about your integration work next. But I wonder if there's anything else you wanted to say around preparation or during the experience that might be helpful for coaches out there to listen.
Yeah, so it's very important to know that there is a very different skill set to be guiding, or it's a different skill set, a different kind of knowledge that you need, different kind of experience also for guiding and for coaching. It took me years to really get at the point. I had a lot of experience with the substances, also with supporting people, but I never thought it was going to be my role, to be honest, until after doing so much work on myself. And I think this is probably something that people cannot teach in a course. They try to make the year programs as interactive as possible, and to include as much exercises for people to go through the process. But you cannot force someone's process, I think. Mm-hmm. This means the awareness that you need to have about yourself and what triggers you and which cases you can take and can't take. And this is not only about having maybe a strong mental label or not, but it's also knowing what triggers you. I had to also to not accept people because I know they could trigger me in a different way. And these are only things that you learn if you know, if you did that work on yourself.
Could you say a bit more about that? Meeting somebody that you turned down?
Yes. For example, it's quite personal, but I am happy to talk about it. So
Thank you.
1 year and a half, I became quite aware of some fear of rejection, so unsafe attachment component, and especially in the initial phase of dating. That's when I've met certain people who I felt rejected by, who could or avoid me or disappear. Yes, the avoidance, or who could trigger me. So I know there were some profiles of girls who could trigger me, that attracted me, but also could trigger me. Mm-hmm. And I had the option to work with someone. Actually, I proposed it initially myself because it was a friend also. But in the middle of the first coaching session, I realized, okay, this is doing something with me. This is doing something with me, and this would not be responsible for myself and for the person to go into this more altered state of consciousness. Mm-hmm. So I told her that I couldn't do this. Maybe in a year, I've been actively working on this theme for a while now, and maybe in a year or two, I will not feel the same in the same situation, and then I can continue doing this. But by being aware of what can trigger me, what is important, I was able to hold back on this before. Mm-hmm. And if I hadn't been doing the work I'm doing about my personal development, then I wouldn't be aware of this, and it could be quite dramatic in this experience. Or there might be a mutual attraction, which is something you definitely not want in an experience. because yes, of obvious reasons, this is not a space to explore this kind of things. Or there might be a trigger from my side where I felt rejected, where I maybe felt some anxiety, which can be transferred to the other person, which is not good for neither of us.
Yeah, to be aware of transference, countertransference, yes. Having done your own work to recognize the triggers, ideally much before any kind of experience. It's so important. And not just for coaches who choose to be present during the experience, but also for anybody who starts helping people prep or integrate. I think it's important in any coaching relationship, but particularly if we also plan to sit with people or guide them.
Yes, in a normal conversation, it's much easier to hide, but in this heightened state of consciousness, it's not possible to hide. You will feel it one way or another, and if it's amplified, it can be amplified for both, actually. So, but I agree. It's for continuing the coaching, it would not be a fit, of course. But
and just to be clear, you if you're sitting or guiding, you won't be influenced by any substance. You'll be the one sober the person has the experience.
Yes, I stay. I don't use any psychedelics when I'm sitting next to one. Sometimes I might do a little bit of cacao, or some rapé. Sometimes, depending on the situation. But I don't. I'm staying sober during the experience.
I'm tempting to ask why rapé or cacao, but I don't think that's relevant for coaching so much.
No.
And it might be a longer conversation that, time might be better spent to focus on the coaching.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So take us to the integration process then. How does that work for you? What's important? Do you have a methodology, a process for that? Just talk a little bit into that space. That'd be great.
Yes. So the integration this is more leaning to more traditional coaching. So this is really exploring what has this person been through, what happened, going back to this space to see what happened, what came up, what kind of insights do they have, what kind of emotions did they have, what kind of visuals did they have, what kind of feeling in the body did they have, all these things, navigating them. I also give them an advice, of course, to start journaling and to do some creative work the day after. I ask people not to work the day after and really spend time by themselves, walking in nature, creating some music, do some creative work, or just start journaling. It's different for everybody what resonates the most, but really taking care of what has happened and allowing all the thoughts come back. A psychedelic experience without reflection on it is just an experience. It is by the insights that we have, by coming back, revisiting this. And also what also helps is I give my music set is dynamic, so I construct the music set as a DJ or as a music lover. You would appreciate that, I guess. So what I do is I start with some ambient, and then I see how the experience evolves, and also the personal experience of this person. I talk with it, and I also give this playlist right after the person leaves.
So they can revisit the experience by listening to the music that they were listening to then.
Yes. So even the day after, people can or meditate or just listen to music and then maybe journal or maybe draw a little bit and then really taking notice of whatever was happened.
When you say journal, sorry to interrupt, but when you say journal, are there any specific prompts that you offer to people?
In general, it's just journaling whatever the stream of consciousness, whatever comes up. I give people a workbook with preparation exercises and integration exercises, and there are some specific questions in there.
For example?
Like what I said before, what were your emotions? What were your visuals? More the specifics, the properties, the qualities of this experience, exploring this, having people to go back to. And this is what we explore in the coaching sessions. So mainly it is about finding the long-term goals. Again, long-term goals, and define this into short-term actions. And because when we have more coaching sessions, it's also about being accountable, about being accountable for these actions, what they want to change. Also, preventing them to make big drastic changes right from the start, of course, but helping them to really transform this experience into something that is long lasting. And this might, for example, be life situations that need to be changed. Some people that want to change work or want to be more engaged in community, in helping people who need to define more clear boundaries in their relationships towards family, towards their boss, towards different people in their life, to support this kind of actions, really changing life experiences. Sometimes it's also helping them with changing habits. People want, and it's very good because we have this window of neuroplasticity. We have this where the brain is more adaptable. It's easier to implement new habits. It's easier to implement change. It really helps people to really start working from the first week or the first day into and if people have a really profound experience, sometimes you don't have to do a lot for this. Sometimes people don't want to drink, which is amazing. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult and they need more support. And then we talk about this, and then next time we talk about how it went and whether they did it.
What's the window of opportunity there, I wonder, because like the brain is still a bit more malleable. It's certainly during the experience. I love the kind of snowy mountain metaphor where there's, we have our tracks and all of a sudden everything is covered and we can go anywhere. And that's often what happens during that kind of experience. That neuroplasticity lasts a little while after the substance is no longer active in the brain. So what do you think is the window of opportunity here to create new habits before people kind of slip back into their old patterns?
I don't know if there is some scientific values that we can put on the length. From personal experience and talking with people, for example, if we talk about ayahuasca, we have this afterglow. This afterglow can last from a few days to several months. And it is a profound, different state of being. It's not psychedelic, but it's really like, you really feel the difference. So I think that it depends on the experience, the profoundness of the experience, how the person is doing, and what you do also. I noticed when I do ayahuasca myself, and when I drink alcohol, for example, afterwards, then this afterglow is finished for me. So I think you can prolong this by really implementing good practices. Be careful who you expose yourself to. Be careful what you put in your body. Be careful where you go to, that you really can extend this period. This is what I believe. I don't know whether there are there is research that defines the length of this.
I know there is. I don't know what it says. I don't think they've reached a consensus because, as you say, there's so many confounding variables that we would need to control for in the scientific process. And it's difficult enough to get clearance on research like that. Yes,
definitely. But they see in the depression that it lasts 3 to 6 months at least. And I think this is the opportunity to really make the changes that you want to make and that people need to make. By the preparation exercises, also a lot is done in the preparation also. A lot is done in the preparation because in the preparation, people sometimes for the first time really take a deep dive in where they are in life and where they want to be in life and see the dissonance, to see where this is not aligned. And people can make already quite some profound changes before they go into the experience, which is really helpful, of course, because if you're not having to take this with you in the experience, it helps you to go beyond this. And it's the chances, in my experience, that you go to a more mystical state are higher when you don't have to go through all these other layers that you also have to look at.
Right. So tell us more about your integration work, because I get a sense for why you're doing this. Are there any particular methodologies? I mean, you start journaling. You said a week afterwards you have the first session, right?
I try to have the first session a week afterwards, and then it depends what the person is working on. Might be 2 weeks after the first session that we have the next one. I sell it in a package of 3 most often. So, and then mostly in a month or 2 we have the session, and sometimes it grows into a continuous coaching relationship. And sometimes people already did their work or they have the impression that they had enough, or that they had enough insights and help after one session.
Yeah. Why a week? Why not more or less?
Because I think it's important that the experience is still present, that the feeling is still really on the surface, that people don't have to dig deeper. And that's also because the sooner you start to make the changes you need to make, the more benefit you can have, of course. If you wait too long, then it might be that the window of opportunity is already over. Yeah.
You said you recommend that people don't work the next day. I wonder what it's like if they have an experience and they don't work the next day. They do some of the work, but then they work for 6 days or 5, and then they come to the coaching session.
Yes, it is. And I recommend in the 6 weeks. Sometimes I talk with them the day after. Sometimes
okay. Within the week.
Within the week, maximum within the week.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yes, when we go back to work, it might be very easy to end up in the same habits, in the same environment as we were to. Sometimes people also have problems with going back to the same environment because they see that this is not a place where they need to be. It's really not aligned with where they want to be.
Yeah. I found that sometimes people really want to jump into action. And I have been wondering whether an important part of the coaching work is to actually put that into context and, if necessary, even, invite somebody to slow down and really to consider this. Because how many people had that experience that you just allude to, and they say, well, this is not me. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to move to Mexico and I'm going to, do this or become that, which sometimes can be really not helpful. To jump into action. Sometimes it's very powerful catalyst for change. So how do you experience that?
So the integration for me is twofold. First is really coaching, more traditional coaching, looking what is their present right now, what have they been through, and how can we translate this into goals and actions, and how can we be with it and helping people to get there. And the other one is implementing practices for them to stay with the experience. For example, mindfulness, becoming aware of the present moment, becoming aware of what they're feeling, thinking. There is also a window of more mindfulness where people are more mindful after this experience. And this is definitely researched, and this is a very good moment for people to start this kind of practices. And this can be mindfulness meditation, just in the traditional sense, just sitting down or eyes closed with guided meditations. But can also be yoga, just being more in the body, or being with dancing, staying in the body with dancing, or just go to nature more regularly, just walking to nature. And these are the practices that help people to get more out of their head and to be able to stay more with the experience, to be more creative, for example, drawing, painting, making music, these kind of things. And for me, what I also help people with is to become more aware of the moment to moment, because mindfulness is often, people think it's sitting down with the eyes closed and listening to someone who can be quite boring for some people. But in the essence for me of mindfulness is to be aware of every single moment, the moment we're talking now, that we're present right now. Also, when you are talking with other people outside of coaching sessions, of course, but also when you are in the traffic, when somebody is doing a stupid move on you in the traffic, becoming aware of what you experience, these emotions. And you can also develop an awareness of this more mystical states, that you remind yourself that this reality, that you can get the feeling of what you had in this psychedelic experience in there. And this is maybe leading more towards some more spiritual practices. But this is something that for myself was really profound to implement this more in my life.
I love the way that you talk about that, because it really slows down time and you become both an active participant and an observer to your experience. And I just, it's so valuable to be able to do that. Not just in the moment, but in general, because you get to actually work with somebody's experience and they get to see that, oh, interesting thought events, interesting that, story that I tell myself, interesting experience that I'm having, rather than getting sucked into the experience that they're having and not being able to make any distinctions between events that are happening inside and outside and, the person who's experiencing it.
Yes, I think it's a very profound tool to navigate life in general.
You mentioned research a few times on psychedelics and mindfulness. I wonder, could you point people towards particular resources or researchers, or could you send us a list afterwards I can include in the show notes?
Yes, definitely. I will definitely send a list of papers I can send him. I'm also working, I do also a psychedelic mindfulness retreats in the Netherlands, in which we combine actually mindfulness with the low doses of psychedelics. Some of the researchers try to compare the mystical experience with what people can achieve through meditation with the one that people achieve through psilocybin, for example. Now there is also new research in Switzerland this year that will happen where they use psilocybin for the same reason. So the synthetic version of ayahuasca, or the synthetic version of ayahuasca. So some research really look into the difference or the similarities between mindfulness and psychedelics. There's all more similarities. There also, they both work on minimizing the activity in the default mode network, for example. They both work on being more aware of all the things. And this is some of the things that they measure more regular in psychedelic research is the mindfulness. And then they measure it before psychedelic experience and afterwards. And then they see, at least in 4 of the 5 properties, I don't remember which not at the moment, but they see that people are more mindful after this kind of experience. They're more aware, they're less reactive to triggers, they are more aware of what is happening. So there's a very strong alignment between those two. Yeah,
and the potential for coaching, when you think about it from that perspective, is enormous. So I wonder, but also the potential for opening therapeutic doors is also enormous. So I wonder how you draw the lines in the integration phase, particularly. At what point would you refer somebody to a therapist? Where's the line for you? Because I appreciate everybody has different lines.
Yes. Two indicators, I think. One is that topics come to the surface which I don't feel comfortable or which I know I should not handle in a coaching session. Might be things that happened in the past which had a really profound impact on their life. That doesn't mean that I stop the coaching agreement, but this means that I refer that these kind of topics should be discussed with a different kind of mental health care, or the different mental health care worker. For example, sexual trauma or quite severe things that happened. And the other one is if I notice that someone is really in a quite an emotional state which it cannot get out. Can get out of, or maybe going to the disassociative diagnosis, being very absent in the sessions, etc. So I think, or the things they talk about are not fitting in what I do, or I really noticed that there is something. Luckily, I didn't have that often. It's very rare, but. Yes, that's definitely the line.
Often, I'm not sure often, sometimes, I'm not sure about the numbers because we haven't got the research, but often that comes up in the screening process, right?
Yes.
In how do we pick the right clients? And sometimes we can already tell that there's something there that they're seeking the psychedelic experience for, or rather against. Sometimes we don't know, and these things happen later, or we become aware of them later. So what do you do in your screening process? I mean, I know you have some conversations around it, but what do you use during that stage to make sure, or to make as sure as we can that this is a suitable client for your work, coaching as a framework?
Yeah, so I have this questionnaire intake form that people have to complete, and it looks in the medical history, physical, the mental. The kind of medications, looks a little bit in the history of themselves, also in the family history, also whether they are or not also under guidance or under support of a psychologist or a psychiatrist at the moment, because it doesn't mean that they have had something very strong in the past that I'm definitely not want to work with them. But if they are, for example, working with psychologists, psychiatrist, he has to be informed, he has to know it, and has to be supported. It happens sometimes that they have this support, and then there is by default there is this clear line between what I do and what is a therapeutic work, because they know what they do with the therapist, and they know what I do. I help them prepare for and guide them and integrate. But of course, these are not people with strong traumas. These are not people with strong acute depression. These are more lingering things often. I don't work with people with acute or very strong things in general. And also medication is also a no-go. As long as the research is not more clear about it, I try to be as clear as possible.
Yeah. How clear? How can we be clear? How are you being clear? Because medication is such a huge umbrella term. Some people might take aspirin or like painkillers, but even painkillers is such a huge range of what it might mean. So where do you draw the line when it comes to medication?
Yes, it depends. It depends. The question asked most is, of course, about antidepressants. And then it's a clear line. No, you have to be tempered off, and not under my guidance, but on the guidance of a psychologist, a psychiatrist who knows the medicine, who knows what you want to do. So that is the clear line back then. Other medicines, yes. Then we look into the contraindications. If I don't know the answer, even if I hesitant myself, I refer them to a medical doctor who knows the answer and can give this advice. So I'm definitely not doing any medical advice in this area.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point, because I've talked to coaches who have a lot of knowledge, and they offer that and they make those decisions. I, for example, always refer out and say, get yourself checked out before you have that kind of experience, because I don't want to take the responsibility. Any knowledge that is being shared needs to be heard from that kind of position. But coaches take varying degrees of, accept varying degrees of responsibility and expertise, or the role of an expert. Yeah. And that's super interesting to me, where different people draw the line.
Yes, I think it's even, I read a lot about it. And for example, last week I had someone contacting me with, and if I would make a diagnosis HPPD, prolonged altered states, visual effects combined with anxiety, for example. I talked with her and I referred her to a psychiatrist. Still, I looked kind of medicine she got from the other psychiatrist to know what was happening, etc. And probably one of the questions she had was whether it is safe to take this. And I found research papers wherein they stated it might help. But even then, I don't tell her that. I just refer her to someone who is trained to do this kind of work. And I think it's liability is an important thing, probably, but also responsibility. I think, yes, these are the two main things in that area. Although I'm quite sure that if she goes to 99 of the 100 psychiatrists in Belgium, that I know more about this that I don't know more about this phenomena as what they do.
I was about to say, how do you find the right psychiatrist?
So yes, I'm quite involved in the psychedelic community. I have a network in the Netherlands, in Belgium. In Belgium now we have a psychedelic society, and it is quite a professional body with psychologists, clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, medical doctors. So I know which people to refer to, luckily. And this is still early stage, of course, because something like HPPD, I talked to her just to help her to find someone, and I followed up with her a little bit, just because I know what kind of stage she is in and how frightening it can be. And just the 30 minutes that I offered her for free, she was already very happy that she was able to talk about this, because people don't understand, and people don't want to, or people wanted to give her antipsychotic medicine. It is very difficult to find the right support. It is very difficult.
And many psychiatrists, I don't think, are the best listeners.
Okay, this will, some people don't appreciate it when I quote this, but this was a quote from a psychiatrist. And she said that many of them are leaning towards the narcissistic spectrum. And it might be necessary for the kind of work they do, because
see, I think you need to say a bit more about that.
No, I think the another client I was talking with, he gets antidepressant for 2 weeks, and the psychiatrist was quite clear. 2 weeks, because afterwards it's only to get you back on track, and then you have to live. Just live. Don't worry. Just live. And if you look at it, it's the same advice as we get with mindfulness. But okay, we give them tools. We try to have empathy towards the feelings of this person, and this is what things lacks a lot with psychiatrists. I think they can really rationally, they can really analyze people and really look into all the constructs that brings them there and why they do these kind of things. Mm-hmm. I question how helpful it is, though. Because it's a different discussion also.
It might, we might have opened a can of worms. Any psychiatrist listening to this and deeply offended, please reach out. I'd love to have that conversation.
And I met several of them, really beautiful people. I also, I think it's kind of necessary in the kind of work that they do, that they are able to take a distance often.
Mm-hmm. And you need to work with the tools that you've been given, and the dominant paradigm in psychiatry is still very much shaped by the DSM. It's very much shaped by what are the symptoms and what can I detect, and the way of listening. When I say they're not particularly good listeners, they're excellent listeners listening out for symptoms that fit the model. Yes. Whether the model is a helpful one, you can challenge that or you can support it. But you're listening in a different way, I think, when you're very person-centered, humanistic, really tuning in the experience of the moment of this person. Then when you're listening from a position of how could I apply the tools that I have available to myself? And in psychiatry, those tools are very different than in coaching, because it tends to be medication.
Yes. And the reason why I probably also I'm a little bit hesitant towards this profession is also because I had quite some experience with doctors when I was really sick and they could not find anything. So they had my tests, and the lack of empathy from their side actually traumatized me. I can say that when I had to go to doctors from the insurance, I really got strong emotional triggers when I had to go there, because I was the worst in my life. And at this point in time, the doctors say, but you should be happy, all the tests are good. And really avoiding and really being arrogant I did some alternative tests and really arrogant. What do you expect me to do with this? Really. So I really was traumatized. And so I think the empathy is really should introduce this back into the traditional in the healthcare system as we have it. I think it's very important.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Tim. I wonder if there's a coach out there who's just kind of getting involved in this space. I think it's so important to have an appropriate referral network, not just therapists in case anything comes up, not just psychiatrists in order to maybe get the screening done professionally. So I guess several questions. One is how can people go and find people like that, other than perhaps reaching out to you because you know a lot of people. But who's in your referral network, and what do you recommend for a coach who might be starting out and wants to be safe and establish a referral network?
My biggest advice is be active in the community, in the psychedelic community. Be active, get to know people. There are some organizations like the Coaching and Psychedelic network. We have the Guild of Guides in the Netherlands. There are the Microdosing Institute in the Netherlands. We have the Psychedelic Society in Belgium. We have Psychedelic Society in the UK. These are all people that are very well known in the community, and they know which people also work more underground, because some psychologists and psychiatrists, sadly, they cannot be open about it because of the fear or because of the chance that they can lose their license. That's one of the advantages that we have as a coach. That we can be public about it, because we don't need to fear that they take away our license for this. So I think it's about building a personal network and really know what kind of people are out there, and really get to know, and contacting and going to community events. I think community is really important. I think the whole healing process, the whole integration process, it's actually also a process that we should do in communities. One of the biggest problems I had with integrating my first ayahuasca experience, my most profound experience, was the lack of community, the lack of people to talk with. And talking with the coach and really being very specific about what you can do and etc. is very powerful. But I think it should be wider. I think we should be there as a community and talk with people in group about these things. So yes.
Yeah, and at this point, I think it's a really good time to mention psychedelicexperience.net, the platform that you've created. Initially, I think as a platform where people can vet retreats or sort of, give reviews when you went to a retreat center, to just create a collection of centers or of possibilities to have experiences where the community can input and comment on, what their experience was, and just gathering opportunities. And I know recently you've relaunched and you added the opportunity to find coaches. So I wonder if there's plans, or if that's already happening, to find also part of the referral network, to list psychiatrists or to list therapists, to list other people that it might find helpful. So maybe you can tell the audience a bit about psychedelicexperience.net and what you're doing there.
Yes. So with the moment I started to look more into what's happening in the psychedelic community, I also found out that it's not everything what happens is I could align with the experience I had. I had this most infinite feeling of joy and of love. And then I found out that there are people abusing people with this kind of medicine. So I was not really, it was confusing initially. I was sometimes even doubting whether the medicine really works or the psychedelics even works. But then I was a software engineer, and I wanted to do something to help people finding the right people. So I created a website, psychedelicexperience.net, which is a directory. It has a directory of over 800 organizations worldwide, which are working with psychedelics, retreat centers, communities, research organizations. Also, recently, shamans and coaches. We still have to update or add more people in the community. And people can leave a review. We also provide articles for preparation, for integration. People also more cultural articles. So people are interested and want to learn more about psychedelics, the preparation, integration, can definitely have a look. Also, if you want to find retreats or organizations, leave a review. It's very useful for the community to know what kind of people are out there, what kind of organizations are out there, how do they work. Sadly, there is some abuse, and there is So that's why it's very important that we have these ethical standards, that we hold each other accountable for having a really high standard of ethics in this kind of work, especially in the coaching, also in the therapy. It's the same. The problem with listing psychiatrists and psychologists is that the same as what I mentioned before, is that many of them don't want to be listed because it is still tricky for them, because they don't want to be associated publicly with psychedelics. Some want, some don't mind, and some are at the end of their career and they say, okay, screw it, just go for it, coming fully out of the closet. The others are working more underground, still doing very valuable work, but they want to be more hidden. So we're still not advertising any therapists or really psychiatrists. There is a website, however, Psychedelic Support, which is listing vetted psychologists and psychiatrists. So people can go there. It's mostly in the States, though. I think we need more local networks in areas where we live now. And now with the boom of the research and in the media, it should be possible to find people quite close by these days. I'm quite sure about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Mm. Where to go next, I wonder? I have a list of questions that we usually ask people. I think this was very flowy until right now.
Yeah.
What are some current challenges that you face as a practitioner?
Current challenges. Yeah, if I look at the business, it's also probably interesting for people, coaches. The business side is juggling the marketing and administration, and the one-on-one work is something that is still challenging. Because I mostly notice that my energy is going towards really doing the sessions. But if I really want to grow, then of course you also need to spend time on marketing and on having a very effective and productive administration process. So I started to work with the VA now
With a what?
Virtual assistant.
With a VA. Mm-hmm.
Yes, with the VA now, to see whether we can streamline my administration processes. And I also want to expand next year. So at the moment, I'm also doing retreats, psychedelic mindfulness retreats, where we combine lower doses of psychedelics with meditation, mindfulness meditation. At the moment, I'm working on an online course. This will be an 8-week course wherein people get introduced to mindfulness, but not only to mindfulness, but the synergy between psychedelics and mindfulness. So it will step by step introduce people to all the tools they need to prepare themselves and integrate their own psychedelic experiences. And meanwhile, developing this awareness of themselves, this awareness of their thoughts, their emotions, where they are in life. So this will be a course, an online course that we will do later on this year. Normally the first will be launched in March or in April. So by doing this, I can reach more people. So scalability is also a problem. I love the one-on-one work. I love the one-on-one work, but it's time consuming. It's also quite money-wise quite intensive for people because it is a personal approach. You have to pay for the time. So that's also why we want to combine it with group experiences later on. We still have to see how much coaching will be involved or not, but I really strongly believe that this kind of approach, what I do 3 sessions before, 3 sessions afterward, is super valuable for the people. So I think at least giving people the opportunity to have the same kind of support before and after, even if it's a group session or doing group coaching sessions. Both can be very valuable. Actually, I would love to hear from you what you would think about group coaching for this kind of event.
I was just about to ask about that. Do you work with groups? Because it's such an interesting topic, because there's so many different frameworks for what could be considered group coaching. And I think at the core of it is what you just mentioned, being heard, having a space where you can talk about your experiences, where you can maybe share your intentions, where you can, talk about how you might want to integrate this, and often also get inspired by what other people come up with, what other people's experiences are. It makes you feel connected. So there's so much value of being in a group talking about these things.
Yeah.
How coaching skills come in is differentiate, there's so many varying degrees of that. But you just wanted to jump in with something.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, do you dig deeper then? Or is it just like an integration circle? In an integration circle, it happens often, it's very valuable. It happens after a ceremony. It happens with the communities. We have a circle, we share. But this is not interactive. This is just mindful listening, giving somebody a platform to talk about his experience or her experience, and active listening and supporting each other as a group.
Yeah.
I was wondering, do you think it makes sense to, for example, in the preparation, to really do the coaching, but then really using the skills to dig deeper in the group?
I think it makes a lot of sense. Personally, I don't run integration groups. I like one-to-one conversations. And you also need to fill the groups, which sometimes marketing-wise can be more difficult than actually signing up one-to-one clients. But there's a lot of good stuff out there. The Mind Foundation, for example, runs their Footsteps program. And then there's another program they have where they have very structured methodologies of what kind of exercises they offer to people. And there's facilitators there. Sometimes they're coaches, sometimes they're therapists. But they guide people through particular instructions of how to bring back the experience, and perhaps offer questions that help them focus on what changes would they like to make. And there's so many different ways in which you can do that. You could just offer it to people and people do it and share their experiences. You could go one by one, give somebody the spotlight, so to speak, and somebody presents something, and then the coach engages with this one person, and maybe the rest of the group is listening in. Maybe the rest of the group is offering feedback, questions, observations, comments, so that they're become sort of co-coaches in this process, or co-facilitators, while the focus is on the person who's presenting. And then, every time you switch, could also be a very long session where you have, several, what do you need? 20 minutes is very short. 30 minutes could also be very short, but in my experience, outside of psychedelics, you can go into quite some depth in a 30-minute group slot. But then how long does the session need to be, and how large is the group? At which number of group members does it feel less safe for somebody who's presenting? How do you craft the group? Is this a group that meets before and sets intentions together, has an experience together potentially, and then integrates? Very powerful experience. Lots of dynamics at play. Or might this be an integration circle where there's different people every time you meet? So there's a lot of different formats, and I wouldn't say that one is better than another necessarily. But I think it's about having a conversation with people in terms of what they're looking for. And then there has to be a degree of experimentation of what sort of group format is going to work for you and is going to work for your clients.
Yeah, definitely. I did the Beyond Experience workshop.
That was the other one. Yes, Beyond Experience.
Beyond Experience. And sometimes for one exercise, it took a whole day. So yes, then probably it's not really cost efficient either.
Yeah.
So it will be about finding the balance between having the group dynamics and about what we can get out of it and what people really want to do.
Yeah. And some of the exercises, I think there's one exercise during Beyond Experience where people are blindfolded, and you have the experience of being blindfolded for a considerable amount of time. I've heard about other group exercises where you're being criticized by everybody in the group and really get primed for quite a heavy psychedelic experience that were to follow. So you can open up some really heavy doors when you do group work, and I think many coaches should should probably stay away from some of these exercises. It's important to be therapeutically trained. And then therapeutically trained means so many things to so many people.
Yeah.
But the power of being in a group can go both ways. It can really trigger people and open something up. So, it's helpful to know about group dynamics, and it's helpful to, crucial to be very attentive to how people are feeling in the group and create some space that you can follow up with people or refer them to help that you might not be willing or able to hold.
Yes, exactly. That's also why I want to go to a 5-day retreat would be probably more ideal. Then you have this getting to know the group, and preferably, and that's what I'm working towards too. If it's really a group thing, that the team is quite diverse. That there are some clinically trained people in the group, even medically, and people who can do yoga or breath work, so that it's a very diverse group. Not only coaches. I think to do the group thing, it's more of a collaboration between different kind of profiles. Need to work together, and the coaching can be very good, but some of the work is what beyond experience is really therapeutic, and we have to also see what is beneficial to go into an experience. Do we really want to poke people into places where they maybe not sitting at the moment? I don't know if that's always that beneficial. Because it can be re-traumatizing for things that maybe didn't need to come up anymore.
Yeah, true. I remember two things. One, I remember an ayahuasca ceremony I attended. Somebody said, "This is the medicine," referring to the group being together, singing songs, feeling the acceptance of, whoever I am, and being met with that kind of gratitude and openness. It had little to do with the substance. And as far as I understand, in some indigenous cultures, their medicine, they're not referring to the substance and the visuals and the psychedelic trip. They're referring to the experience of spending time with a shaman and, going on an inner journey of being in relation with someone or a group.
Yeah, I'd love to share a little bit about an ayahuasca experience of myself, if that's appropriate in this podcast.
Sure, absolutely.
Yes.
The only thing that I wanted to throw in, the other thing I thought about was, I remembered somebody told me that they're going on a 7-day retreat, ayahuasca. And I immediately assumed it would be one ceremony of ayahuasca and then 6 days of integration. And I said, no, we're going to be drinking 5 or 6 times. And I'm like, oh my God, okay. So, in most retreats, they're not making time for the integration as part of the retreat. And that's, I find, really interesting, and I really appreciate. I think I can see a trend where some of that is built in more, but I'm not sure. Maybe you can comment on that.
Yes, I think there are some retreats that are doing that. The problem is people have to pay for it also. I think people, if they take 5 days off from work, and they can choose between having 3 ayahuasca ceremonies or 1 ayahuasca ceremony and some talking in group sessions. I think still many people
if you put it that way,
they still think many people would choose for the 3 experiences, because it seems more value for money. Although we have to educate people about the importance of this integration. I used to be very skeptical about people doing this kind of the ayahuasca retreats after each other, because I thought, how can you integrate all of this? But this summer I had experience to be with the shaman for quite some time, more or less 2 weeks, and doing several ayahuasca experiences after each other. And they really built on each other, and it's really layer by layer was able to go deeper. And there was a really profound experience, which, in the shamanic setting, they talk about the spirit of ayahuasca, which is humanized, or at least it's a female spirit, and she often appears in this kind of visuals, whether that is by suggestion or whether it is. Let's still leave that in the middle, but it was it was presented to me, and my intention was, how can I better be of service? How can I better help people? And then she gave me a guitar, she gave me a drum, she asked me to go for a second cup. She showed me a shaman and had to go for a second cup. And afterwards, a silhouette came and embraced me, but it was not alone. It was all different kind of beings that were supporting each other, and it was a tribe of people, and it was shown to me. So I was there in a tribe, in my experience within the tribe, and this is what makes it so powerful. I didn't plan to stay there for 17 days. I went there for three retreats, 3 ceremonies, but the process of being in a group, and the process of to heal in a group, and the process to support each other and to have fun with each other, but also to go very deep and vulnerable with each other. This was so important. This is why I think the community thing is, yes, it's really part of it. It's really a part of it. And this was shown very vividly in this experience also. So really beautiful, and I think we should go more towards, we live in so individualized society. I think community working, also raising children, for example, this is something that people do alone now. I think we are not meant to do that alone. Healing
takes
also,
a village.
Yes, it takes a village, exactly. Also healing from the things we've done, been through. I think we need support each other and to come together as people, and that's also why we need these communities, online communities, to talk. Tribes of coaches talk together to learn from each other. Try to people who work in the field come together, but also just everybody coming together in tribes.
I love that, Tim. Coaches out there who might be listening to this, they might have some experience working with psychedelics, but they might come in fresh and they're curious and might have, had some psychedelic experiences. They're wondering, where could I train? Where can I learn more? When they hear, I want to get involved, they probably want to get involved right now in some of these communities. I wonder if you could point them in any directions that might be a good starting point to find your tribe, to find some like-minded people.
Yes, I think the whole psychedelic ecosystem is maybe not divided. At least there are different ways to look at it, or there is a very scientific way to look at it. Then you have retreat centers like Synthesis, and you also have the clinical research. There are some user groups, reading groups. There are communities that are focused really on the scientific level. The psychedelic societies, they sit sometimes in this spectrum. People, really scientific people coming together. So, and on the other side, you have more shamanic approaches, and then you can go to or local communities, or in the Amazon, or really local people who drink medicine together, or just drink water together, and then even singing songs. And there is a whole range in between. So you have some people who are leaning more to the New Age side. So first is about reflecting on what kind of community resonates most with me. And then it's about finding the right place, finding the right organization. If you, as a very scientific person, end up in a New Age community, it's you will not be very engaged and happy, I believe. So it's about finding the right people. And for example, on Psychedelic Experience, we have a list of all kinds of different societies and communities, and also people who work with the medicine. Get to know people and see who you resonate with, who not. People in the Amazon, for example, if you're drawn to the shamanic approach, go there, see what resonates there with you. So it's really about finding the right people. It's difficult to say you have to start here. The societies are always a very good point to start, because it's a very nice combination of different kind of people who are just passionate about this. And
Did you get to say what you wanted to say earlier about ayahuasca?
Yes, I think so. The most important message I got in this experience, and it was quite a profound experience, because it felt like really I having my own tribe in the ceremony room with another tribe around me, and it felt really came to me, we need to spend more time on building community, really connecting people with each other. And it's not only about healing and about the science, it's also about having fun. It's also about enjoying life. So some things that we sometimes forget. So sometimes you're so caught up in the doing, in the achieving things. So for me, it's still about with psychedelic experience. We also try to build community, people who want to be do psychedelics. But for me personally, it will also be about organizing more in-person events, bringing people together who work in the field or who are interested, doing local events like integration circles for people who want to share and want to learn more, because integration circles are also about learning. It's not only just telling about your experience is very interesting, and can be very good, but it's also about hearing the struggles other people are going through, the healing process of other people, which can be really resonate. And it helps also people, if you share about something, helps people to open up about it too, maybe. So that's why I think it's very, very necessary that we go back more to the tribes, to the village. In this global world, we still can build these tribes.
Yeah, in a way, easier than ever. Because it's much easier to find your people when you feel a bit out of place in your local community, in your physical village. You know, it was never so easy to connect to other people about psychedelics. And maybe that's a good segue into a question I wanted to ask around the stigma around psychedelics. Because it still has a certain reputation, and it's sometimes easy to forget when you're inside those circles, and it's so appreciated that once I handed in a CV and I got excited about like starting to think about coaching in psychedelics. We had founded an interest group, like a think tank, and I had put that on the CV and I sent it off, and I never heard back from that person about that. I thought, oh yeah, I think maybe I forgot that. I'm very excited about it, and I know about the power and the potential of it, and I see it very positively. Maybe other people don't see it so positively. So I wonder how you manage that when you're in touch with people.
Yeah, very funny. There was a documentary on the national television here in Flanders 2 weeks ago, and a friend sent it to me, and I replied, "Oh, really good. Maybe stop thinking I'm crazy right now about this." And she replied, "Keep on dreaming." So maybe it's also partially my personality, but yes. So exactly, we live in this kind of bubble, and for us, it makes so much sense because we have experienced this. But I feel that I never had much. I've only once had one, because I'm also active in the professional communities. I only once had a business owner talking to me, and he said it was, and to be honest, he was under influence of alcohol and MDMA at that point. That I was stupid to be talking about psychedelics on a business podcast in public. So that was quite of a hypocrite. It was a little bit hypocrite in my feeling. But apart from that, I never had a really negative feedback from people. So I think the perception is changing, and it's at least people are curious. People are curious, and the more it hits the media, then the more people will be curious about this. Still, we have to be careful, but I think it is not. It is, for example, I'm also doing a workshop about microdosing for professionals, for example, and this I also do, for example, in a company that is trading some kind of materials around the world. Has nothing to do with coaching or with mental health. These are probably the first companies that that get involved with this first, but even other companies are seeing the benefit, starting to be interested in it, seeing the benefit. So I'm quite positive about this, and I'm not holding back anymore. I know the first time I recorded a podcast with someone in 2017 or 16, I asked the person to remove it back from LinkedIn because I was definitely not ready to have this in public. But now I think we should be very open about the use, very careful what we say, of course, especially because of legal status. But we should be very open about the potential and about the research, about the healing properties, about the transformational properties.
Yeah, the potential is very much there, and we've experienced the power of it. But talking about being careful, talking about legal status, bringing us back to the very beginning of our conversation about like, it depends who I'm talking to, and maybe there's something there. I might be a policeman.
Yeah.
Any words of warning for coaches who are getting involved in this?
Don't do anything illegal.
Good, solid advice.
Don't do anything illegal, then you don't have to fear anything, and also don't promote it. We can talk about the potential benefits, but don't go to people. Hey, I noticed this in you, and you should do this.
You should do some psychedelics. It would really help you.
Like I said, after the first experience, I thought everybody should do this. Yeah, that's after the real buzz went away. I said, okay, everybody should be able to experience this and talk about your own experiences.
Yeah, because it could also, as Hendrik von Mind once said, like it could also be a totally psychotic episode, or I think, what was it? Tim Ferriss talked about the climbing the mountain of pain for 1,000 years. Some of these experiences can feel like that. So I see a lot of people having one experience or two and then being so excited about talking about it in that promotional way, when that might not actually help people, so we need to be very careful with what our own experiences are and what other people's experiences are, because in my experience, every trip is very different, not just for me, but also for other people.
Definitely. And I hosted the integration circle on Monday, a workshop about hosting integration circles, but we first had an integration circle, and I wanted to start again with my first mystical experience, which was very loving and joy, but I ended up talking about a very difficult one, because we also need to talk about this kind of experiences, because it is not all beautiful and love. It can be very challenging, and there's a lot to learn from these challenging experiences, but people need to know, of course, before that it might be quite emotional, that you can have quite intense emotions in this kind of experience, that it can be quite confronting, that it might change your worldview. And these are the things that the mentoring part of the preparation things are bringing in before.
Yeah. What would you wish you had known when you started out?
So for my own experiences, it is again the importance of community. Again, because I struggled quite a long time finding the right people, because I didn't realize that that's what I had to do. Just finding the right people to talk with. There was not an ecosystem with coaches back then. There was not no referral networks of therapists, etc. And even though I had the most beautiful, or one of the most beautiful experiences in my life, integrating was still a challenge, because many things in my life were not aligning with what I was supposed to do. So that, I think that was, and this is evolving in really in the good direction, that we have all these kind of support things for people, the one-on-one support, the group support, the websites where can people read about experiences, these kind of things. As a coach, it's developed step by step, and I was in the psychedelic field much longer before. So I think educate yourself. Don't be. Some people take mushrooms and they get the thought, I have to be a shaman or a provider, or have to be a guide. One question I often ask to many different people, how do you know the difference between, because people say the mushroom told me. I say, how do you know the difference between what your ego is telling you and what the mushroom is telling you? How can you know this? And even if something is telling you to be a guide, a shaman, or whatever, don't forget that traditional shamans take 6-7 years at least to be able to serve some medicine. This might be a sign that you have to go into the education, educate yourself, go through the personal process. This is the most important thing. Educate yourself. This is on the rational level about the dangers, about how to help people, what you can do, which areas you can go, which areas are beyond your boundaries, but also go to the personal process, like I spoke about. Know what triggers you, what kind of situations you should not get into. And for me, it has grown naturally. But I can imagine if you start right now, with all the hype and with all the enthusiasm, it might be very tempting just to jump into it and to do the work from day one. I say, okay, I help people, and I combine, I just start guiding, etc. I would say, take your time, let it grow organically. Like for me, it was. I think that was the most important thing for my journey, starting to do it professionally. That I took the time to get into all of this, and step by step, I gained the tools, I learned the tools, or by going to a course, or by attending courses and workshops and medicine, or by experiencing myself and learning about myself, by using the tools that I use now for other people, to help other people.
Yeah, thank you so much. Talking about the mushroom told me, I see there's, not sure if there's two camps, but like there's certainly a spectrum of people believing that there's an intelligence out there that can be Mother Ayahuasca or the mushroom or the universe, some sort of external or universal thing that you can download knowledge from, versus on the other end of the spectrum, that it's literally your mind revealing itself to you, and that whatever you see is your own mind. Where are you on that spectrum, I wonder?
So you want my personal opinion, not how I approach it. Okay, so the first time I did quite a lot of psychedelics in my life. So I started when I was 15 years old, and all kind of different experiences. And I did ibogaine in 2012, and I never had the feeling that I'm a very rational person. I never had the impression that something came out of myself until this one ayahuasca experience in 2015, which I felt this connection with a bigger consciousness. And I felt this connection, and this is, it's not something I believe. This is something I experienced, and it still might be a trick of the mind, but I'm aware of that. But the experience feels so real that I felt, okay, there is something that connects us bigger as our own individual egos, and there is something that is connecting the material world that is beyond the material world. So what this is, and this is what you find also in Jung, the collective unconscious. This is what you find in the Eastern philosophies. This is something that we find quite often. There's now also the science is going in that direction. Some scientists are going in that direction. For example, into the idealism that the material world is created out of the thoughts we have, out of our own egos, that we collectively dream or experience this world, but that in the end it's all consciousness. This is something I experienced, so I could say that I'm on that I believe that. About the individual spirits, that's also, I thought it was very strange. And I saw a researcher presenting on the ayahuasca and the psychedelic science conference in 2017 in San Francisco. And she said that 75% of the people, she was a clinical psychologist, and she said that 75% of people who do ayahuasca believe that there is a spirit in this kind of experience. This blew my mind, just the number blew my mind, because I thought, oh, can that be possible? But now I've had quite a few experiences that were so intelligent that I consider that there is a possibility that in this collective consciousness, that there are some kind of mental processes. This is how Bernardo Kastrup calls it, mental processes that are not active in this material world, but still have an influence on this collective consciousness and our individual consciousness. I know this can go in a very strange direction, but if you want to hear one of my craziest experiences about ayahuasca over the summer, that was the second ceremony I did. And at first I saw quite some images about a big feline, like a black panther with big teeth and quite violent, quite raw. And I saw all these images, and it was not scary, but it was quite raw and really the predator, really like a very. And then the images went away, and then I started to my body. Ayahuasca or psychedelics sometimes can take over your body, and it's really took over my body. My teeth started to clench, my face started to frown, and my hands became claws. And I was in an experience of being a Black Panther for 45 minutes. It was on the limit of controllable. And since then, I had this experience a few more times. And it's not something I had affinity with before, or something that I had thought, okay, yeah, let's turn myself into some kind of animal. So where does this come from? I'm still researching this, and I'm still learning more about it and what I should do with it, or should I do anything with it? I don't feel that this came only from myself. So yes, that's where I'm on the spectrum. By experience, I know that the intelligence can be so intelligent that I have the impression that things are not always coming from myself. Most often they are, because what I know with psychedelics is often it just amplifies what you're thinking. And then people say, yeah, the mother told me, or the mushroom told me. And then 99% of the time, I question whether it's their own ego, the thoughts from their own ego, or whether it's something from the outside. But turning myself into a panther is definitely something that I had on the program for myself.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Oh, that's very cool. I'm picturing it.
Yes.
And I can see the panther in you.
Thank you. It's quite. It's really a strong, energetic release, and really, really powerful. And yeah, it sounds really crazy, but when I can go there now without I can still feel it sometimes.
Wow, powerful. Okay, hey, we have a couple of, we say quick fire questions, but they could, feel free to take as much time as you want for them. The same questions we ask every guest on the show. So the first one is, what are some books or people that had a significant impact on the way that you work?
The consciousness medicine. That was. I'm not sure if I'm still able to promote it, or that's still a good thing to promote this because of the controversy of her work. There were some boundaries crossed in the work that she was doing. But for me, it was a very good framework. Besides that, I read scientific papers. So looking at the safety protocols of what they use in the clinical trials, looking at the qualities. This is a very, very important paper. I think the qualities of a psychedelic guide or a psychedelic therapist. This applies for everybody who wants to sit. My coaching experience comes more from courses. Your existential coaching course was very helpful also for this. And I try not to idolize people. I tried, so it's difficult to say that there are people in the community. I'm very grateful for all the work that they're doing, but I cannot say that there are people that are really shaping that I would mention now to.
Yeah, this is just to point coaches who are, still learning, still training around this into some directions. What do you think about regulation? Do we need it? Is it in the way, particularly around existential coaching, around coaching in a psychedelic space?
Good question. So I think it is better to have self-regulation, to define like what you're doing, of what we're doing with psychedelic coaching and psychedelics, defining the standards and really trying to hold yourself accountable or to adhere to this kind of standards. And also other people, that we as a community work on keeping the bar high, that we really can have the quality, very good quality of service. I don't like to have too many regulations, although it's a difficult one. I think it's a more complete discussion, because we should prevent that harm is done, of course. Mm-hmm. And people who call themselves a coach or a guide or a therapist, even people call themselves a therapist without any proper education. We should have a way to work with this, the same as we should have a way to work with sexual abuse in the communities, or with other kind of abuse, emotional abuse, people being taken advantage of. But do we need this? Do we need law enforcement to enforce this upon us? Or is it better to do it as a community? I'm more leaning towards the community, but this is a very complicated topic to give an absolute answer on this.
Yeah, and I'm so tempted to respond to it, but that would open a whole nother conversation. Thank you. I appreciate your thoughts on that, and I appreciate the acknowledgement of the complexity of this question, because it's a difficult one.
It's a very difficult one, yeah. Especially
with coaching, because it's so beautiful that it's so free. And people can really do what they authentically feel drawn to. At the same time, there's some really rogue individuals out there who I think just putting people at risk by being overly confident in the way that they work and not particularly reflective of what the risks might be, or overly enthusiastic with the best intentions.
And that's a problem, and it's still a big problem, especially because it's psychedelics, and psychedelics are not legal, and we still need to find the way how they will be introduced to society. And I hope that we can go both towards the decriminalization and the therapeutic, the medicalization. I think we need both, or at least both, for full legalization, of course, but at least decriminalization and the medicalization, because then it can be used in the for the clinical population under proper guidance, but it can also be used in communities. But all these kind of stories, if people abuse it for their own gain or for their own ego, for their own pleasure, these are all stories that can backfiring against both processes of both the medicalization and the decriminalization. So we should be very conscious about it, and I think we should talk about this as a community, keep on talking about this, because the conversation is an ongoing conversation. But
that's why we're talking. Right? This is why this podcast exists, because people don't really talk about it, and we need to bring it out of the underground into the community.
Yeah.
You kind of talked about this already, but like maybe to summarize, if somebody asks you what the difference is between coaching and therapy, what do you tell them?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it already a little bit before. So you definitely have to go to a therapist if you have some really mental struggles. If it has a label, or it can be labeled, probably go to a therapist first, see what's the work you can do there.
Really mental struggles.
Yeah, it's difficult.
It's difficult, right?
Yeah, it's difficult.
I know.
It's a difficult one. What often happens in therapy is analyzing where it comes from, digging deeper where it comes from. This is not what I do in coaching, or what I think coaches should do. Coaches, we look in the future, where you want to be, where you want to go in the future. How can we get there? It can be very practical. It can be learning some tools sometimes, depending on the background of the coach. or it can be just goal setting and action and accountability and these kind of things. This can be done by a therapist also. Some clinical trained people are doing coaching also. The big difference is the coaches look more towards the future, really going further and beyond. I think therapy is more first resolving what you're sitting with right now, which is very difficult at the moment to overcome that. But it's difficult to explain.
Yeah, I know. I heard a really cool way to maybe not explain it, but like as a general distinction by Carol Kaufman. She wrote that while the practice can look quite similar in terms of what you do in the room, coaching follows the trail of dreams, while therapy follows the trail of tears. I quite like that. It's very alive, it's very visual in some way.
It's really beautiful, actually. Yeah. Yes, I think it's the moving on, and I think it helps people to work with both a coach and a therapist. What sometimes happens, so people say, okay, I had enough therapy, I feel I'm getting to the limits there. Maybe looking forward is now the thing to do.
Yeah. Right. What's next? Any notable current or future trends that you see in the field of coaching and psychedelics?
Yeah, it is evolving constantly. So it is very excited to witness that. So some of the more concerning trends is people with a lot of social media knowledge, not with the knowledge of both what is ethical coaching or what are the boundaries within coaching and also the psychedelics. This is something that is concerning, I think, sometimes, because they can reach a lot of people, and sometimes people romanticize and even make it very sensational, the work they're doing with psychedelics, and bringing in some kind of toxic, how should I say this respectfully, toxic worldviews or toxic methodologies, by spiritual bypassing, for example, ignoring the work and just going towards the love and the light, for example. These are things we have to be careful for. I think there's a growing awareness that people need to be properly educated, but some people start to do this work without proper education, without proper experience. This is also concerning. On the other side, the places where people can go for different types of coaching and therapeutical ways to work with psychedelics is also exploding. So yeah, it is very fascinating to see from all different sides.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever been in a situation where you started working with someone and then had to stop? Either way, if you referred them or you just had to stop?
Yeah. Yes, I mentioned one case before. That's because I was really not comfortable continuing that process. Because I knew I was going in a very delicate area of my life, but also people who are being supported by a psychologist, for example, and then notice, okay, the depression I thought I recovered from, or I wanted to temper off the medicine, it is not going as expected. And then we said, okay, then it's not the right time to continue. This happened already a few times, that we passed or that we broke the contract and I just give a refund in this case. If it's just because they don't want to do the coaching, that's different. But if it's in this case, then we talk with them. It's happened a few times already, because many people are looking for solutions if they have depression and these kind of things, and some are very optimistic sometimes about their progress, And then it happens sometimes that we decide, okay, this is not for you right now.
I just think it's so important that you tell this story, because often when I ask this question, people talk about the client, and often we don't talk about what's going on for us. And, we are the reason that we cannot continue the work with them. It's not our clients that are too broken or whatever, not a suitable client and they're not good enough or they want to talk. No, it's us we either don't do that kind of work or we don't feel comfortable or we don't feel competent or, we just don't want to.
Or we feel competent, but like with the medical advice, I actually, if it was a friend, I would probably give her advice. At least I would share, not advice, I would share the knowledge I have. But this is something we should definitely not do. Professional. We can share information, but we don't want. Yeah, we need to be very careful with all these things. It's super important.
Yeah. Without breaking confidentiality, obviously, but could you tell us a story about a really memorable client that you've worked with?
One person who was really, it was like nice to see. She was really struggling with the breakup. They had children stuck together, really struggling with it. Already a few years, they still had to see each other because of the children. And we worked through the preparation, and there also always so many insights came to the surface, how to handle frustrations differently in life, how to maybe make already small life changes just by the preparation exercises by itself. So there was already a lot of work that was done before. And then we had a session together. And 1 or 2 weeks after this session, she contacted me, said, hey, I met someone, I fell in love, and we're dating. And she was not able to date for a few years. She was always stuck in still in this broken relationship, and which she had just to integrate into her life. And these kind of changes are really profound to see. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. I can feel it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is really beautiful, and this kind of things that I notice with people. Also, for example, someone who was quite modest and really in herself, and then in the experience, she was super active. Most people lay down, and she was very active, and she really wanted to talk a lot. And this was really the experience that she needed at this point. Sometimes we tend to go really to the mystical, because also science sometimes says that it's correlated with the best outcome. But sometimes it is just totally another experience, and which is fine. And it's also nice to do it one-on-one, because most of the work I do one-on-one, because you have much more freedom to have people express what they want to express. Mm-hmm. If it is in a group setting, it's very difficult, because in a group setting, you don't want to disturb somebody else's process. So, yeah, many really people discovering their inner child again, really, or finding self-love, or realizing what is toxic, or just going directly, quite a young guy, going directly to a non-dual state, like a non-dual state, and really having this very profound spiritual insight at quite a young age. For my age, he was quite young. It was not a teenager, of course, but having this really profound insights into nature of reality, if I can say so. This is so beautiful to see and to witness, and And a lot of this is also about emotions, feeling emotions and learning to relate differently. And this is why the mindfulness and the psychedelics work very well together, because the psychedelic can you make really aware of the emotions and show you why you have these emotions. Sometimes it shows you what are the different situations in life where you, what kind of, and is it necessary? Sometimes it shows it's not necessary, or it's, yeah, all kinds of really beautiful insights. And this is something we can integrate, and with having more presence and a continuous practice of being aware of what is going on.
Mm. Oh, wow. Lots of stories coming to your mind there.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd love to explore all of them a little bit more, but we're nearly out of time. So here's nearly the last question, I reckon. And feel free to think about this for a moment if you want to. If you could take over the screen of any person or group of people, including the whole world, or might be an individual, could be a screen, or, you just have their attention for a minute, undivided. What would you tell them?
You want me to choose specific people?
You could choose a person, you could choose a group of people, or you could choose everybody in the world. And you have their attention for a minute.
What would I tell them? I think it boils down to the insights where I talked about before.
I figured it would.
That is about community. A community that is that we should go back more to this community feeling, and to learn from each other and from ourselves, that we should teach children to become aware of their feelings, their thoughts, their emotions, and that there are still altered states of consciousness which are very beneficial to explore for people, because we can learn so much from about ourselves and about other people. And if I should have to choose a defined group of people, I would choose the world leaders and the politicians who rule the world. These are the people who we need to approach and find a way to influence, or to influence the policies that are ruling the world.
Yeah, and gear them more towards community.
Yes, exactly. Community and personal healing and personal well-being. Let's call it well-being instead of healing. Healing can be a little bit put off for some people, but let's call it well-being, mental well-being.
Yeah. Thank you. Who do you think we should talk to next on the podcast? Are there people in the coaching and psychedelics, or coaching and psychedelics related, that you think might be helpful, or that you would want to hear an episode about?
I have a think about it. If somebody comes to mind, I'll send it over.
Perfect. And last question, where can people find you if they wanted to work with you? Do you have anything going on that you want to tell coaches about?
Yes. So my main offerings are my coaching. So I coach people, preparation, integration, also doing the one-on-one high doses. I also guide people who want to be involved in the psychedelic space. I also include tools like microdosing, potentially, and high doses of psilocybin in truffles in the Netherlands with it. So, and then next to it, I have a retreat of psychedelic mindfulness. We will do the online course later this year. Everything can be found on my website, timkoels.net. People also find me on Instagram or on Facebook if you want, or in LinkedIn if you want to connect with me. And they can also have a look at our website. It's not my only mine effort. It's psychedelicexperience.net, where they can find the director of all organizations worldwide who work with psychedelics. Please leave a review. Tell people how organizations are working. It's very important for the community. And I love to hear. I'm also very open for questions if people have questions. Just reach out. I'm very approachable.
Tim is very approachable indeed. Do talk to him. Tim, I just realized I came into this conversation thinking we're going to take a huge chunk of time talking about microdosing, and I don't think we really have. I wonder what we do with that. We have a little bit of time left. I wonder if we do that now, or might we do that in a separate conversation?
So we can cover it quickly, and we can decide whether we need more time for it. But maybe it's not necessary. So microdosing is a tool that some people use to improve some areas of their life. I always call it a tool, and many people go for it there now because of wanting to elevate their mood, for example, or being more productive, etc. So I help people with the practicalities of it, but also finding the intention. It's not the main thing I do. It's a small thing I do at the moment. And I think it can be part of the process, the preparation and the integration process. I think it can be very beneficial. It will be interesting where the science is going, because some research is indicating that it's mainly whether you think you did it or not that defines whether it works or not. Other research is done where, again, proving that it has some neuroplasticity, that it's improving neuroplasticity. So it is quite interesting. But it's actually, it is a tool that is used along the process of this integration. Integration is a process actually from the preparation to the after the experience. It's a continuous process. Coaching is a part of it. Microdosing might be a part of it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've got 100 questions left, so I think we might need to make this another episode.
Okay.
but thank you for this short insight. I think there's a lot in there.
Okay.
Any particular sources that you would point people towards if they like coaches, particularly if they wanted to explore microdosing a bit more?
Yeah, the big resource that I want to mention is the Microdosing Institute in the Netherlands. Microdosing Institute, they already have a community for a very long time. It used to be Dutch oriented, but now it's open. It's in English. They have also a network of people who work professionally with microdosing. They have courses. They have a lot of information. They also sell legal microdosing products. So that would be the main stop I would refer people to.
Fantastic. Tim, let's end it here. Thank you so much for your time and for your generosity and for sharing your perspective with us. I really appreciate it. And I know we'll see each other again soon, I have no doubt.
Yes, thanks a lot for the invitation. I really enjoyed this kind of conversations. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Have a good one, Tim. See you soon.
Bye.